Welcome back to the Books Brothers Podcast, the podcast where longtime friends spread across the country reconnect over the pages of a good book. Each episode, we dive into what we are reading, sharing our thoughts, debate, and enjoy a few laughs along the way. Whether you're a big reader or just listening to the discussion, join us as we explore insightful topics and connect each week. I'm Garrett.
I'm Matt.
I'm Rob.
I'm Adam.
I'm Fuzz.
And I'm Thomas.
We are currently reading through The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness by Jonathan Haidt. This week, we'll be discussing the final part 4, Collective Action for Healthier Childhood. But before we dive in, let's take a quick break to listen to a word from our sponsors.
Feeling down? You're not alone. Many people find that the modern world can be an overwhelming place. Traffic, spilling your Starbucks, tummy aches, not being able to afford that Apple Watch you wanted. It's stressful. Maybe you need someone to listen to you, even a normal person, to offer some perspective. What are you waiting for? Pick up the phone and call our hotline. We'll hook you up with one of our third world therapists. No, they aren't real therapists, but they can help. And we're trained in one of our call centers for at least 2 weeks. They'll attempt to understand your so-called problems and respond by telling you how insignificant they are. Lost your dog? Well, at least your entire village isn't facing famine and a cholera outbreak at the same time. Having trouble getting to sleep because your air conditioning broke? Most third world therapists don't even have electricity yet. Ignorance is bliss. Third world therapy. You have problems? We disagree. You just need an attitude adjustment.
That's good.
Let's go. All right, welcome back. Before we hop in and discuss the last part of the book, I did want to call out, this will be the last discussion episode of the book, but in 2 weeks, we will release a special episode, our first ever panel interview where we have guests on the show. We will have a licensed professional counselor specializing in child and family therapy, as well as a pediatrician on the call. And we will discuss a lot of the topics in this book and their experience in their everyday careers and how it pertains to their interactions with their clients and patients. So we hope you join us, and we're excited for the panel and excited to interview them and hear what they have to say. All right, this last part of the book, it provides some clear examples and recommendations of what 3 specific sectors of society can do right now to affect change positively for improving children's experiences growing up. The first is government and tech companies. You kind of combine them together, schools, and then third is parents. I'm just going to recap basically the entire 4 chapters, and then we'll just kind of talk about it because they're shorter chapters, very specific guidance. So we'll just go one by one. The first sector, again, combines government and tech companies into one. For governments, policies need to be updated and strict enforcement should be implemented for teen use online. So first, the age for someone to be able to have a social media account should be increased to 16, so 3 years older than today's current 13-year-old requirement. Then there must be stricter enforcement for tech companies to actually verify that a person is 16. Currently, all someone has to do is simply check a box stating he or she is 13 or older, and that's it. You're able to go onto the website, create a social media account, etc. Tech companies should also create more safeguards with easier user experience for parents to implement restriction features on phones and computers. So they exist today, no doubt, but they can be very difficult to actually implement on the phone. But the work isn't solely in the virtual world. While governments should introduce more restrictive internet access for young people, they should also narrow and clarify what neglect laws exist in their jurisdictions. This will free parents from worrying as much about getting in trouble for allowing their children to play in what historically was considered safe environments. Lastly, more direction and encouragement should be given to schools and education environments to promote more recess time and more vocational programs, especially for boys. So then there's school. For schools, it was really simple. There was essentially 2 main points. phone-free schools and increased playful experiences at those schools. The author clarified what phone-free means, because a lot of schools say they have phone-free, they're a phone-free school right now, but they're really not. This does not mean not allowing students to be on their phones during class only. Rather, schools should require phones be placed in a phone locker or lockable phone pouch. I actually do this when I go on my licensing work trips and we go see Disney never before seen footage of a new trailer of a new movie. We have to literally put our phone in a little pocket sleeve and it's locked, and you only get it unlocked when you exit the auditorium. So we do this for Disney and Paramount. We can do this for our schools. This would mean students would not be on their phone at all the entire school day, forcing them to interact with each other in between class breaks, at lunch, etc. And then on the playfulness part, more recess and better playgrounds that include loose parts or junk, natural elements, and fewer rules. Lastly, the parents. The author provided age range appropriate ideas and recommendations for how parents should raise their children, including screen time recommendations per age group and ways to better engage your older children. One common thread I saw across every age range: spend intentional time with your kids and spend time outside. All of these chapters and recommendations are based with a premise as the title of part 4, collective action. So being the only parent to not give your kid a smartphone in elementary school feels hard. Advocating that your children's school is completely phone-free is daunting. However, the author provides websites and social groups in the US that you can join with other like-minded parents who share similar values as you. Once a large enough group exists, you take collective action together. Knowing you aren't alone and working together with others is the best and likely only way to create meaningful, positive change in your community. I'll try to put some of those in the show notes as well, the links that the author provides. So, concluding the entire book, the author finishes the book by aptly naming the conclusion, "Bring Childhood Back to Earth," as the introduction of the book, you may recall, was called Growing Up on Mars. By speaking up and linking up, we can create change and provide future generations better experiences growing up in the virtual and physical world than the one Gen Z is experiencing with social media right now. All right, so that was the recap of the entire section, and it was a lot, but it was also very compact, a lot of good stuff. Which recommendation across any sector did you like the most from the author on ways that we can improve things? I'll kick us off. I won't give a specific one, but I'll say I really enjoyed his, was it a Hawaiian parable or
Samoan, I think, or Polynesian.
Samoan?
No,
Yeah, it was like a
Polynesian.
Polynesian proverb of fishing for minnows when you're standing on a whale.
Mm-hmm.
Of the solutions oftentimes are literally right before you, but we try to overcomplicate things and we're fishing for minnows when becoming a phone-free school is very easy and you can implement right now. And that would cause drastic positive changes in students' lives. So I thought that analogy of we're standing on whales currently, we're looking for minnows when these big solutions are right there, literally below our feet.
I agree. I think 2 and 3 were definitely the most easy to implement and the most, in my opinion, likely to have an outsized effect on kind of turning back the clock in terms of technology. Governments and tech companies can only do so much. And even then, if the people that are spending time with these kids, who are responsible for these kids personally, aren't going to monitor and sort of do what they know is best for them, then the things that governments and tech companies do won't make that big of a difference. So to me, I don't know about you guys, but I kind of feel like these solutions for schools and parents would be a big relief in terms of how difficult it is to keep kids paying attention in schools with phones. You take them away, it makes everybody's job easier and produces better results. Same with parenting. You have parents overcomplicating, I think, in a lot of ways, their control over their own kids and trying to put so much effort into helicoptering. Give them a break. Let them have their have it be socially normal to let their kids go and play and have some freedom. And it's actually easier to parent that way as well, I would assume. So I think it's a win-win for both schools and parents as well, doing these things.
Isn't it crazy that one of the recommendations is like to advocate for more recess? As a kid, didn't we love recess?
Yeah.
To get out and to play and to hang out with your friends and play games, kickball, all those things. I wonder what a recess for a sixth grader looks like right now. Is it them all just going and huddling around each other and like sending each other Snapchats of them sending each other Snapchats? Like, is that what it looks like today? It almost seems silly that we would have to advocate for like kids being kids and playing rather than trying to curb their addiction. That is, like we talked about last week, it's like a generational, or not a generational, it's like a societal addiction at the same time. But I think, yeah, it really starts in the home too. I think you get it right in the home. If everybody gets it right in the home, right, then going to school and not being addicted to your phone while you're at school can be more reasonable or achievable, attainable.
I like how he mentioned Richard Reeves' book Of Boys and Men. The author mentioned it a couple times, and boys and men are struggling right now in ways that I think a lot of people maybe don't realize. I read this book maybe a year ago, and it talked about recess, and it talked about how females or young girls are typically way better at sitting still in a room and paying attention for long periods of time than young boys are. And I think recess, especially for boys who maybe have a lot of energy or act out during class, is actually going to reverse a lot of that behavior more than, in some situations, the punishment for acting out is withholding recess, which the author mentioned was actually the worst thing you could do for a kid like that needs more playtime. And actually, in Of Boys and Men, holding all boys back a year so that they're more developmentally in line with the girls, that they might be a year younger than the girls in their class, but they'll be more likely to be able to sit still and pay attention, was one of his recommendations on how to make things a little bit easier on at least boys growing up.
That's an interesting thought.
I would just say, as a response to Rob and your comment, Thomas, as a father of two boys and thinking of just raising kids in general, I think more recess time is fairly counterintuitive to me. I would say that's been something where my mind has been changed since I've read the book, because I think of my experience living abroad and seeing how much these kids are in school from age 3 and how much they study at night. And oftentimes I'm like, man, we kind of slack here in America. We need to spend more time in books. We need to spend more time. I wouldn't say cut out recess entirely, but a lot of the things that he was saying about adding more recess was pretty counterintuitive to me. So I think a lot of times there's this inner competition. I don't know, Matt, if you feel that at all, but you don't want your kids to get behind the other kids. So it's like, well, shoot, the way to not have them be behind their own peers is to make sure they're doing homework and getting a tutor and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And more playtime is not at the top of my list on ways to help my kids thrive in a school-specific setting before I read this book.
Yeah, I don't want my kids to fall behind. But Emily was a teacher, elementary teacher. She's just taking a break while our kids are young, and she's going to go back. But she's been advocating for more recess for years. She sees it in the classroom every day, and how kids get so distracted, they just can't focus for a really long period of time. And so having that recess time is extremely valuable for the kids to get back on track so that they can learn better. Mm-hmm. And also for the teachers too. The teachers, their time is being cut short for time that they have to prepare lessons, to work with kids individually. It seems like administration just keeps piling more and more work on these teachers. And so they don't have the time to really prepare their lessons for the kids. If there's more recess time, teachers have more time to prepare too. We just sent our oldest to kindergarten this year. Their elementary has 2 recesses throughout the day from 9 to 4 for 15 minutes each. 15 minutes is not long.
You're still picking teams at that point.
Yeah.
Still picking your nose.
It's nothing. That's not hardly a break at all. You just get some energy out for a little bit, but
They're like,
you don't
and
really
go
get time
sprint.
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Emily, she's a strong advocate for more recess because it does help them develop better and focus. And I don't know if it was mentioned in the book or not. I don't remember. I think one of our indicators compared to other countries is testing. And a lot of kids just aren't good testers. So we're basing a lot of these results on one test.
Also, does taking a test make you a good citizen when you get older?
Does it make you smart? Does it make you a good person?
Do you guys remember those like state writing things that we had to do? They'd have us write about a story or whatever. Do you remember those?
Like what was the prompt? What do you mean?
It was just like every year they had us do this like state writing thing that we had to like tell a story and explain the story. And I always remember talking about, it was like my 8th birthday or something. And we went to this pizza place and my cousins, they jacked up my pizza and basically made me eat it. And I always talked about how I got diarrhea on my birthday.
Okay.
In your state writing exam?
What? Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure I misspelled diarrhea too, because I probably still can't spell it
That's
right.
That's an A for entertainment.
It's just so funny thinking back on like 8-year-old Robbie talking about getting diarrhea for a state writing exam.
Like, who is this kid?
It's the only way he could pay attention long enough to actually write about something is make it about diarrhea. Every little boy is obsessed with that.
So, Matt, with what you said about recess, though, between this book and then other, I don't know, I just heard a lot of places about like the benefits of recess and play and that kind of thing. And so, I mean, everything you're saying, I would say is always what I've heard in recent years. And I'm curious, Garrett, do you feel like this book changed your mind with that then? Because it sounds like you would have been kind of anti-recess in the past.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Did this change your mind?
Yes, I am. I am pro more recess.
Yeah. Did you feel like you don't like recess because you got picked on for your hair color when you were a kid?
Nope. I have a lot of memories
on you, man.
His nipples.
Yeah, I get
What kind of recess is that?
one too many titty twisters, and I just put me back in the classroom.
Garrett's just flashing people on the playground. But I will say one of the best ways to make sure that your kid doesn't fall behind is to work with them at home. Like you guys are saying, it starts in the home. Spend time with your kid, teach them, help them learn. Don't just sit them in front of a TV or social media. Sit down with them and help them learn what they're supposed to be learning.
I'm curious, Matt, Garrett, how much time do your kids spend in front of a screen a day?
Depends on the day. If they're having a bad day, we might let them watch one movie. So however long a Disney movie
You guys
is.
did the screen time average last week. What would your average be, Matt?
For the kids alone, though.
An hour.
An hour a day. Yeah.
Probably less on average.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I would say before pre-K started, they would be less than 30 minutes a day. We try to take a technology Sabbath. So on Sundays, I'm not on my phone. We don't watch anything. You guys are going to laugh, as you should, but I'm trying to figure out how to implement a 24-hour tech fast with football season starting. But I think I'm going to commit to doing that.
Minus Chiefs games, right?
No, I'm thinking of how to do that. Like,
wait, Garrett, you're saying on the Sabbath still?
Maybe. Well, yeah. So like it might be Saturdays, and it's like, yeah, just don't watch any college football or something like that. But like a day where it's like, hey, we're just gonna stay off the screen. So, but since pre-K has started, I have to pick my son up at 3:15, but I still have my work day. So part of it's been like, hey, this is brand new. He's not having naps now. And hey, just turn on a show while I finish my work day. So he's watching like an hour to hour 20 on Mondays and Fridays. And then I don't know how much my mother-in-law lets him watch. I should probably ask, but yeah, we try to limit it to like 1 hour per day, but then we don't watch anything on Sundays. And I don't know what they're watching Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So it's definitely under an hour a day.
Gotcha.
On average. But for the little guy, the 2.5-year-old, it's probably 20 minutes a day on average, maybe 30.
I feel like that's less than I even watched.
We're really into Royals highlights right now. Almost completed a 4-game sweep of the Guardians. I don't know if you we might actually go to the playoffs. And
tied for first place right now, right?
Graham loves baseball, and so of course that means Clark loves baseball. And I'll give the MLB credit; they do an incredible 8 to 10 minute recap on YouTube every day of the previous game, and they like do it chronologically, so you can kind of like follow along who's going to win, who's going to lose, and it's just been a really bonding time. You guys were talking about playing Super Smash together; like we'll watch the games together, and they love Bobby Witt Jr. He is their favorite player. They want to see they're like, where is he? He every time, when's Bobby Witt hitting again? And Salvi. And that's like a bonding thing. So there's at least 10 minutes a day, because nowadays I'm like, we got to watch the highlights. But it's a very bonding experience. But yeah, we try to limit it for sure.
I think you're doing good.
Anyone else have any thoughts on like bringing it back to any specific recommendation? So I'll push a little bit deeper. That sounds weird. Sorry. I'll probe a little bit further.
That's not any better. That's not better.
So I asked which specific recommendation did you like the most, and Thomas, you answered what your 2 favorite of the 3 sectors were, which it was a great discussion. For practicality's sake, let's get very practical. What is a specific recommendation that the author Ch.9-End Haidt posed that you all like the most? We don't even have to like dive into it per se. I like phone-free schools. I really like that.
I like keeping social media out of their lives until they're at least 16.
Okay.
Yeah, what was the pact that different 10 parents could make together? What was that called? Do you remember that?
That was like the collective action group. I'll put those
I like that.
that
Basically,
in the show
like
notes.
10 families all agreed that they wouldn't give their kids phones until a certain age, and that they would also be able to go play with each other and not be like the weird one without the phone in their group of friends. I thought that was really cool.
That's great.
I like the concept of more outdoors time. That's one thing. Even, Daphne, she's 13 months old, and she's so much more easily entertained just by being outside than by anything inside.
I like the phone-free schools. Put them in a locker or a locked bag.
Yeah, that or the no social media until 16 or even later, honestly. Let them graduate high school.
So I do like the no social media until 16 a lot. I just think it's going to be harder to actually enforce as parents. Kids are going to be kids. Like we've been saying, if they really want to get on, they'll find a way.
I think I would disagree, only in that there are lots of apps, at least on Androids. I know of one called Bark, where you literally see everything on the phone that you pay like the account for. So you would know. Yeah, I'm sure there's a way to get around it. Like I shared a couple weeks ago with my dad's internet blocker, but it still covered a lot. And I think parents could do a lot more. I think my pessimism there is government and tech, where tech is going to, he interviewed, why am I drawing a blank? Facebook CEO. Yeah, Mark Zuckerberg. 10 years ago, hey, how are you verifying the kid's age? And he said, we're working on that. And he said, right before I wrote this book, 10 years later, I tried creating an account. It was the exact same experience. Like, they're not doing anything. They are going to do what maximizes shareholder value. And until they are forced by external forces, you watch Social Dilemma, the creators of these social media companies, Pinterest, they aren't letting their kids have iPads. They're not letting their kids have social media accounts. What does that tell you? So I don't have a lot of hope in the tech or government sector. And yes, kids are going to get around stuff, but I think there could be more measures parents could take that would minimize stuff. Maybe I'm ignorant though.
No, I think for the most part, you're on. I just think, like Matt was saying, when your son goes to little Jimmy's house and little Jimmy lets your son use his phone for 2 hours to make an account on Facebook, he's going to ask little Jimmy to get on his phone all the time when you're not around or something. I mean, there's always something people could do.
Garrett, I would agree with your last statement about you being ignorant. I'm just kidding.
Oh, brutal.
No, just that your last statement that parents could do more.
You disagree that parents could do more?
I agree with you that parents could do more in the tech world. Our generation, definitely the older generation, just doesn't know a ton about IT in general. I think parents could learn a lot more about internet security, network security, how to protect your home internet, firewalls, all these things, site blockers that a lot of people our age, mostly older generations, they're just ignorant of, and they don't care to learn, or they think that they're too old to learn.
Matt, what would you say is, as somebody who's pretty knowledgeable, what would you say is like a super underrated tool, like a DNS level filter, or what would you say that it's something that people don't really know about or know how to use, but it's almost impossible to get around?
Yeah, as not an expert on any of this stuff, I would say a firewall. Have a firewall at your home to protect your network. And you can monitor sites, you can block specific sites from your firewall.
There you have it, folks. Big D.
I don't have one set up myself, so I'm talking to myself also.
And Matt, sometimes I engage in the contrarian point of view just for the sake of the debate, but I do agree that kids will find ways around it. I think of stories that I've personally heard where, I mean, kids are smart. Parents will set up firewalls and the internet protection, and kids will figure out how to get on VPNs, things like that. So
yeah,
I definitely hear you, and I'm not that ignorant. But
I think just as much as finding ways to stop kids from doing things, which makes them a lot of times want to do it more.
Yeah.
The whole spiel about, and Garrett, you mentioned this in a prior episode, but just leading by example. Just don't be in front of your kids ever just scrolling around on your phone for no reason. Basically, use your phone as a tool to get things done, or if you need to, but otherwise, like, don't let them see you be a role model that makes them think it's okay to sit around and surf for 30 minutes or an hour and ignore everybody in the room. You know, I think that's a big part of it too, right? Because they're going to grow up to emulate what they see the most.
Yeah, I thought of a story because I don't want to be redundant. You all know my stance on this by now, and I appreciate, Thomas, you sharing it. Another aspect of it to add on is I have learned recently, I'll share the podcast link. It's about fatherhood, and they were interviewing this guy that's trying to help families set better boundaries with technology. Oddly enough, I don't know why I just thought of this, but he started off the podcast episode sharing that he went to his son's game. His son scored a goal. Everyone cheered. His son looked over and his dad didn't see it. He was on his phone. And I think I need to fact check this, but what he shared is that emotionally and mentally, that experience as a child, seeing your parents not like physically present, but not emotionally or cognitively present, is the same emotional response that a kid will get of like an absentee parent. Like it's the same feeling. So you can physically be in the home with your kids and you can give your kids the same feeling as if you were physically an absentee parent. And that really struck me and stuck with me. Because speaking of the Sunday Sabbath, tech Sabbath that I was talking about, I was not doing the best job this past Sunday. And Brooke and I were trying to coordinate something, and Graham's playing this game with his Hot Wheels toy. And it was something silly. He shot the Hot Wheels toy and he happened to hit an empty Gatorade bottle. And it was just a fun thing with a 4-year-old. And And he's like, Dad, did you see that? And he turns around and I was on my phone. And thankfully, those instances are rare. But it was just the fact that, like, he will never say anything. He'll never be like, that hurt my feelings. But it's like he had this really proud moment just being a kid. And he turned around and I wasn't looking. I wasn't watching. And I had no excuse. And when you compound those experiences, that adds up over time. One here or there, not a big deal. And that leading by example, what you said, Thomas, is so pivotal.
Super hard to do, though.
That's why you got to call Hammer Time.
That's right.
Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors.
You did it again. You promised yourself you wouldn't, but when the time came, you gave in once more. No, I'm not talking about looking at porn. You clicked I agree to Instagram's monthly updated terms agreement when opening its app again. Despite learning that the social media companies evade every type of potential safeguard against your data and sell your information to profit their shareholders and potentially expose your identity to the dark web, you just can't get yourself to spend 10 minutes combing through 6-point font legal jargon. Besides, you already tell yourself you'll hit agree anyway. Don't worry, there's a solution for victims like yourself through our nonprofit organization, Hammer Time. At Hammer Time, we take your data privacy extremely seriously. Text or call 816-246-6050 and have a Hammer Time volunteer personally visit your house, take a literal hammer, and destroy your phone. You won't have to worry about any of your data being sold any longer because you just won't have a phone. It's not your fault that these social media companies exploit your human psychological needs and use it for their profit and your demise. Call today and let Hammer Time do the work that you should have the self-discipline to do yourself. Hammer Time, because using a hammer is just more satisfying.
That was good.
Yeah. Was that your number?
Like it.
The 816
Yeah,
number?
whose number was that?
That was my
That's a Lee Summon number.
phone number growing up.
Somebody's getting with all these calls.
Shout out Lee Summon, Missouri.
And now back to the show.
So you talked earlier, Thomas, which is so true. The mindset of like, I don't want to learn. I don't want to like learn how to do tech stuff. Like not having a growth mindset. That's a very real thing. Haidt, the author, started part 4, this entire section, almost first paragraph, quoting someone. And I feel like we've all heard it and we've all probably said it ourselves. Quote, I agree with making changes, but it's too late. Basically, he pushes back on that, and that's what part 4 is all about, of him essentially pushing back on that. Do you agree with that statement or disagree when you hear things as it revolves to technology? I agree with making changes, but it's too late. Do you think it's too late, and why or why not?
I mean, his whole agenda on Instagram is pushing phone-free schools and making changes, so I don't know how much he really feels that now, but that's his whole agenda. He's really campaigning that it's not too late.
Yes, no, of course, he believes it's not too late. He's saying when he talks with others, that's a common statement he hears from others, that in the public sphere, the public discourse, people say, hey, I agree, technology, kids are screwed, but hey, it's just too late, Jonathan, it's just too late. And he's like, no, is that how we responded to the tobacco industry? No, he does not feel that way. I'm just asking you guys, do you all feel like you fall into that belief? Like, gosh, there is just no hope. Like we're never going to do phone-free schools. Like this is not going to get better. It's only going to get worse.
It definitely feels like an uphill battle, given how rapid things have changed over the past 10 to 20 years with phones. It only feels like it's further going into that danger zone with just AI on the horizon and all this buzz around artificial intelligence and all that stuff. But I don't know. I think it still does start in the home, right? So I do believe in the compound effect of the collective action where, man, if everybody sees the bad repercussions of this, then we, the people that are reading this book, the people that believe in it, can rally around and try and change course. Yeah. But I don't think it's going to be an immediate thing unless it becomes governmental.
I definitely don't think it's late. And I think really that thinking that way it's almost like a victim mindset, or like really just a lazy mindset of, I don't want to change.
That's good.
Thanks.
I think that's very a wise statement.
Really this book is talking a lot about Generation Z and really kind of the next generations after, but really it's talking about all of us. And so everyone would have to change to write the course, as we discussed how really parents, adults are having the same issue with phones and such. It's just that people don't want to change. But I think you can look at the six of us when we do change, big course, or, we do a 180 with something like that. I feel like the lessons learned from it can be even greater than sometimes having never gone down that road. Someone who was using or addicted to social media and then reverted from it and now no longer is. Those stories, I think, are, more telling, and that person might develop more character to say than the person who never started using it in the first place. And so it's to say willingness to change one's behavior really does help us to grow in so many other and different ways, especially when the mindset is focused at personal betterment. And, I really think it's kind of a domino effect. If you start to develop discipline more in one area of your life, you're going to develop discipline in other areas of your life. And so it's not just that doing one change has small effects in your life, but rather it affects your whole life, and it can affect your whole community too. Because as you're doing things and others are starting to see it too. And, Flez, you've shared some about your experience with kind of moving away from social media. I've moved away from social media, and it's no coincidence that you find groups of people that do this together in a friend group. You'd see a whole group of friends that's not using it. It's because it has influence on others.
I even think in a practical sense, reading, that's not social media, but I tell people I've read more since I've joined the book club than I had probably the last decade combined. It's no exaggeration. So you join a community that values certain things, you start adopting those habits, and reading is now a habit in my life, in my routine.
It's good.
Thanks to you guys.
What I'm a little afraid of in terms of whether it's too late or not is that this is going to end up being like yet another thing that kind of splits communities and cultures by privilege almost. So you'll see maybe certain schools opt with maybe more knowledge of these studies, more resources to do phone-free schools, while a school that needs the most probably, maybe with kids that aren't as privileged or as knowledgeable about the detriments of technology, don't, or they're not forced to do it. So I can see where a sweeping government change like phone-free schools, no matter what the school is, like public schools, period, that would be super helpful to level the playing field in that way. Otherwise, I'm afraid it'll be changes only in certain communities that already have a leg up in a lot of ways.
On that topic, real quick, does anyone remember what the author wrote about as it pertains to different socioeconomic communities and how social media and technology has affected? So basically, the concern when iPhones and smartphones rolled out was, would poorer, lower socioeconomic communities be able to afford it? And would it only widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots? Well, it turns out 15, 20 years later, the answer is no, it did not. People from every socioeconomic group have smartphones. Where it is disproportionately affecting not as well-off communities is the lack of education and resources around the effects of social media and groups like support groups to help. So single moms who are just trying to like work in 2-3 jobs, like, hey, just turn the TV on, give the kid a phone to distract him because he's got to just take care of himself all evening, So it's not the financial resources of getting a smartphone that's widening the gap between the haves and have-nots. Rather, it is the social media usage and the negative effects that come with that is more disproportionately affecting the have-nots, you could say.
And you think about the number of people that are easier targets for these big tech companies, and it's the people who are in those sort of situations. So it's just like a lot of other industries, like the food industry. They target folks to buy a lot of the stuff that's not healthy for you, and they make it the cheapest thing on the shelf. and that's what they push the hardest. And
There you go.
that's the stuff that takes you from a place where you're not doing so well to a place where you're doing even worse. And I'm afraid that's going to happen with the tech industry and social media and everything else, unless, like, as a culture, we all kind of turn towards this new paradigm of tech use for kids.
Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors.
Do you ever miss, those bracelets? I'm not talking about Taylor Swift's friendship bracelets. No. I'm talking about the WWJD bracelets, which, if you didn't know, stands for What Would Jesus Do? Before the age of phones, you'd have a nice bracelet to constantly remind you of how guilty you should feel about what you just did. If you're seeking some modern-day nostalgic throwback to the 90s, you have to install the newest app, WWJD. What would Jesus do digitally? Would Jesus really just swipe left nonchalantly? Or would he stop and pray for her first? Would he send that text after a second glass of wine? Would he respond on TikTok after someone slandered his name? Or would he throw back to his Pontius Pilate trial and remain silent? The only way to find out, aside from reading the text, that is the Bible, not an actual text message, is to download WWJDD using our patented AI technology called DJ, which stands for Digital Jesus, will constantly monitor your screen at all times. When your mom comments on your Facebook post and embarrasses you, bam, a pop-up on your screen will appear on how to respond with a gentle word. And that's just the beginning. Download What Would Jesus Do digitally today. That's WWJDD. Because long before the internet age of WWW, there was WWJD. Know what he'd do by installing the app today.
That's amazing. Great idea.
That's awesome.
And now back to the show.
So we've reached the end of another book, season 5. So a way, I guess, to kind of recap the whole book, talk about it in kind of a concluding manner. I'm a very practical person. I want tangible things that I can do to make a difference. As you think about this entire book, what you've read, some of your takeaways, whether you're a parent or not, we all are part of some community. So what's one practical takeaway from this section and just the book as a whole that you plan to actually implement in your home, in your church, neighborhood, whatever community you're a part of?
I think for me, the big thing is just awareness.
Okay. What do you mean by that? Awareness?
Letting other people know about this book, just starting the conversation about this book and all the things that it talks about. And from there, hopefully having that group of friends that are on board where we can link up together and try to do this together. I have quite a few friends that have kids around the same age as my kids. And so if we're all doing this together, that'll make their lives better. So just spreading the word, spreading awareness, I think is big for me.
Thanks for sharing, Matt. Les, what about you?
I don't know. I only read half the book.
Yeah, but you successfully deleted your Instagram, right?
That's true. So, yeah, I mean, having a goddaughter that just started middle school this year, just like a couple weeks ago, I think, again, the preventing like kids from using social media until they're older is what I think is the most important thing from this, in my opinion, just from like a mental health standpoint, especially for young women. And even though you guys said earlier that it's probably the hardest thing to implement as far as kids getting around it, figuring out ways, still think that that's something that should be focused on heavily. Just because something's hard or there might not be good ways to prevent kids from doing it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. The phones, no phones in school is good, obviously. Help with focus and everything that you guys already said. But I just worry. I worry about my 11-year-old goddaughter going to middle school and what could happen if she started a social media account. There's fear there. And especially considering that I got sucked into it and it took me forever to get away from it. I don't want somebody that's that much younger than when I started Instagram to get sucked into it and to have all the negative effects of it happen at a younger age that's an emotional thing for me for sure, picking that one as my number one from the book. But I think it's the one that can have the most positive impact if there's things that can be implemented.
Yeah. I know I shared with you guys just a little bit about this Sunday, Garrett. I know we talked about it yesterday, but I don't know all the specifics. The youth community that I'm involved with my church, the night went really somber and south really quick because a 14-year-old boy took his life like an hour before. In theory, he should have been at where we were at because he attends that weekly function. And so I don't know all of the details, but based on what some of his friends were saying, it was a mental health depression type of scenario that escalated. He seemed fine that day, earlier that day, posting Snapchats, doing stuff with his girlfriend and stuff like that. And then hours later, it's done. And it's really sad. And I'm sure that if it's depression, mental illness, that maybe, I don't want to speculate, but maybe that is because of some social media involvement, or I think that could play a part, right? And so just looking back on our conversations, I think that protecting the youth is important, and parents do a really poor job. I know we all kind of shared of us growing up and struggles that we dealt with, and we found ways around them. And I think, how do we become more intentional parents around protection when it does come to the virtual world? And so I'm just personally motivated to treat technology as a communication tool between the parent and the child, and keeping that really limited to, rather than just literally giving the world to them within their fingertips, right? And so that's something that I really want to focus on implementing, is not caving, standing firm to our beliefs, not really worrying about what anybody else thinks, because at the end of the day, I think we're going to form better children if we stand behind this purpose.
Yeah, Rob, I like that word that you used, intentional, because the reality is if we just kind of let life affect us, if we go with the flow of what the culture is doing, we're definitely going to lead to more and more issues. And so I think, the call for me as a person myself is being more intentional about my actions, my decisions, when it comes to any screen time related things, any social media related things. But then also as a parent, hopefully to, have one child now and hopefully to more in the future, but to be intentional about how I'm going about raising them and not letting culture make those decisions of what they consume, but rather playing an active role of saying, this is how we're going to do things and this is why, and explaining that. And because I also think on the contrary side, we've talked a little bit about kids do find ways around things, but kids are smart, and kids, they do look up to their parents. And so if you just say we don't do this, then that's one thing. But if you say, hey, this is something that we don't do because of X, Y, and Z, that goes a lot further.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
I'm starting with a man in the mirror.
No, I really honestly think like the world's way too full of people trying to yell at everybody else about how to act and how to live and what to do. So all we can really do is to talk to people about why we're doing the things we're doing and why we believe that that's the best way to live. And I think because this is a cultural issue now, because tech is such a intertwined part of our lives, we just have to do everything we can to control and be disciplined and intentional, like you guys said, for ourselves and our households, and then try to share that in a way that's not speaking down to others about why this is kind of the best path forward for our kids and ourselves and everything else.
Thanks, guys, for sharing. Really enjoyed this book. I'm very excited for our panel interview. That'll be fun to hear from a child and family licensed counselor and a pediatrician. And obviously, as more of us are entering the parenting world, Stalen, when we started the book club, did not have a child, now does. And a couple of us now, we have kids that are in actual schools, and this is only going to become more and more personal. I was even thinking, Rob, as you were sharing, and I appreciate you sharing that story. I was thinking of, we were talking about baseball at the beginning. You know, during the playoffs, they'll have this moment in between innings where everyone stands up, fans, players, and it's stand up to cancer. And they write a person's name that they know personally that's been affected by cancer. It's my dad, my cousin, everyone's got one because cancer is so prevalent. And when you were sharing that, it just made me think that we're already there or on like a similar trajectory of stand up to mental illness or whatever, but just like this is going to be a more and bigger problem if we just kind of let culture stand still, right? Like what Stalin was saying, if we just kind of let life happen, and everyone will be able to fill in that blank of someone we know that's taken their own life. Or so, I mean, we probably already have that person that can come to mind right now, right? And we're standing on several whales, whether it's schools, family, whatever our communities are in, that we don't need to be fishing for minnows. We can take some steps now. So I appreciate you guys sharing and getting into another great book.
What did you guys think of the vibe of the book in general? I personally felt like there was a lot of data, like almost too much data.
Oh, really? This is like my favorite kind of book to read, I think, is like data commentary.
Did you listen to it, Thomas?
Yeah, but maybe it was because it felt more repetitive because I listened to it. And then we had the same conversations that were very similar each time we met too. I don't know. I guess I wish it would have had maybe more personal stories of people and what they were going through or something like that, rather than just like the hard data, because it was kind of depressing just listening to the hard data.
Sure.
Like things are going in a bad direction.
I'm still a kid at heart, so I'm reading a book. I'm like, man, this chapter's long. And I turn the page. I'm like, sweet, a graph. I only have to read half the page on this one. Dude. So I like the
That's
data.
so funny.
I did have the graph separately, but it's not the same.
No, the PDF thing, not at all.
I can relate to that, Garrett.
Especially when it's dense. Yeah. All right. Well, that concludes our discussion of The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. In 2 weeks, we'll release a special episode where the guys sit down with a child and family licensed professional counselor, as well as a pediatrician, to discuss these professionals' experience firsthand working with children and the challenges they're facing with technology. After that special episode, we'll return in October for season 6. It will also kick off year 2 of the podcast. For season 6, we're pivoting topics and we'll read a historical fiction book called Gates of Fire, an epic novel of the Battle of Thermopylae, which is the battle that the movie 300 was based off of. If you are a millennial and were teenagers when that movie released, like we were. Matt and Flez, you both recommended this book. What caused you to recommend it to us, and what are you excited about reading it?
I think number one is just it's a nice deviation from the books that we've been reading, like personal development or books like that. And then I personally love the history of the Spartans, and I just think that they're badass. And love the movie 300. I think that as like a group of men that are brothers, I think there's going to be some cool tie-ins to that and how they train and fight for freedom and come together and lead each other. I think there's going to be some cool stories in there that we can all learn from.
I think you said it well, Flez. Camaraderie is a word that came to mind. I've actually read this book before, and it's very memorable. It's really good, well written by Stephen Pressfield. I think I read it 10 years ago or so, and I still remember quite a bit of it. But what I remember most is the realism. The movie makes it seem, it's Hollywood style, but this book really gets you into the gritty details and the gore and the exhaustion of fighting a war. And yeah, it's just a very good book.
All right. Thank you. Yes, we're excited to read this book. And like you said, Flez, it will be a good deviation from some of the topics we've read in the previous seasons. So with that, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Books Brothers podcast. We will post a link to purchase The Gates of Fire in the show notes so you can read along with us. If you have enjoyed listening or benefited from our conversation, please subscribe, give us a review, and share with a friend that you want to connect with. Lastly, we would love to hear your thoughts. You can reach us by email at connect@booksbrotherspodcast.com or on Instagram at booksbrotherspodcast. Until next time, read, reflect, and connect.